As y'all have heard me say before, the most important part of planning any adventure are the snacks. And if you're looking for a delicious and nutritious snack that packs a real protein punch, crack into a good source of protein with tasty, healthy, wonderful pistachios. Each 1 ounce serving of wonderful pistachios contains 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value in that one serving. It's one of the highest protein nuts out there. And that's not all. Pistachios are also known for the fiber and better for you unsaturated fats, which may help keep you feeling fuller longer. Best part, wonderful pistachios come in a variety of flavors and sizes. Perfect for enjoying with your family and friends or taking them with you on your summer adventures for those snacks we're talking about. So whether you're dropping off the kiddos or running between meetings or about to climb a mountain, fuel up with a healthy and tasty snack. Wonderful Pistachios will be your new go-to. You can check them out at wonderfulpistachios.com and learn more about how these little green wonders can power up your day. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason Gravely. Today is a Throwback Thursday episode, but it's one of my first ever interviews, and it was with John Fielder, the famous, world-famous Colorado photographer, probably the most famous photographer to ever come out of Colorado. His books can be found all over the world. Like I said, there was one on my coffee table, his black and white images that came out around the time of this episode. But I listened back and I'm like, oh my gosh, one of my first interviews, this was rough. You know, I feel like I'm a lot better now, but it doesn't matter. John said it was one of his favorite interviews ever. And in fact, I went to a talk not long after this where he spoke and gave a presentation to hundreds of people. And he pointed to me and said, hey, that guy right there gave me the best interview of my life. And I that will be something I take to my grave. I'm actually probably going to put it on my resume. It was the most encouraging words that I needed at the time when first taking over this show, and still gets me giddy thinking about it. But the reason we're playing this episode today is because John Fielder has passed away. It's actually a couple months ago, so this is a little late. I've been meaning to revisit this. I had some issues with the file, the audio file, but I got it working, and it's out a little late. But just with his passing from pancreatic cancer at the age of 73, gone way too soon. He had so much more work to do, so many more pictures to take, and so much more advocacy to achieve. His pictures were so instrumental in the protection of a lot of wild places in Colorado. They were used to show to legislation and decision makers, hey, here's what we want to protect. It was instrumental in the Colorado Wilderness Act of 1993. He won tons of lifetime achievement awards and a lot of firsts. And like I said, his influence was so huge in this space. So it was a huge honor to be able to sit down and talk to him so early in my interviewing career. I hope you enjoy. I hope you get inspired. Please ignore the less than ideal audio quality from my early fumblings in hosting this show, but so sad to have him gone from this world. And I know that his work will continue to inspire folks and continue to protect land. So enjoy, learn something. Let's dive in. Today I have with me a guest who's been on the show a couple times before. Well known. A lot of you know him, even if you haven't heard him on here before. His name is John Fielder, and he is Colorado's preeminent nature photographer. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Mason.
Yeah, thanks for being back on. And this is my first time ever talking to you, and it's definitely a real treat for me. I've been familiar with your photography for years now. So this is just fantastic.
Well, it's doubly good when somebody appreciates what I do. I need pats on the back just like everybody else.
Man, yeah, I believe it, man. You even the best of the best need encouragement. So, man, I can't thank you enough. I actually got a chance to look at your new book. It's gorgeous, and so I want to just talk about that real quick. You're doing something a little different this time. You're kind of taking a page out of old Ansel Adams' book and taking the color out of Colorado. You know it's called Colorful Colorado, right?
Is is that what those signs are going from Utah, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Kansas when you enter Colorado? Oh yeah, I remember those.
It's something very different for you. You took every bit of color out of this book. You've got 200 plus images, all in black and white. So what inspired you to do that?
Well, you said it, Ansel Adams. My two photographer heroes are Ansel Adams, because of his extraordinary black and white photography and his prodigious environmental ethic, and then a man named Elliot Porter, who was the color Ansel Adams of the 20th century. Not quite the environmentalist, but he had a remarkable eye for composition, and I learned from both of them. But yeah, I felt it was time to eliminate the color out of colorful Colorado, and when you do, one's eye tends to go towards edges and shapes and textures without the distraction of color, and it can be in some ways even more powerful than a color photograph.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. My wife's been trying to get us to get black and white images hung on our walls, and I just love color. But we went into the Maroon Bells this summer just to do some backpacking. And when I took a picture of the bells, you always see it in color, and it's gorgeous. And I got home, and we wanted to hang one up, and I changed it to black and white. I immediately loved it twice as much. Something about when I took the color out, it just made the image so dramatic. And it's really counterintuitive, honestly.
It's funny that you'd mentioned the Maroon Bells. Did you make that iconic photograph of the Maroon Bells reflecting in Maroon Lake?
Yes, and that's the one I did in black and white. I know it's been done before, but you got to take one yourself, even every time you're there.
Well, if you want to understand me and my personal ethic and philosophy, believe it or not, and your listeners won't believe this either, but in 40 years of Colorado photography, I've never stood on the edge of that lake in the summer and the fall to make that classic scene, because in the very beginning of my career, I never wanted to do photographs that, might be considered cliche, that I wanted to make my living and my reputation, and just, I knew I would enjoy more exploring places that were so remote that maybe very few people had ever been there. But with that said, in this new book, Colorado Black on White, the only photograph I've ever made from Maroon Lake is a black and white photo made in December with a partially frozen lake and mist coming off the lake, and then snow blowing off the top of the two bells. So it's a time when nobody else does that scene in the middle of the winter.
Yeah, I'm looking at, actually just opened the book, man. It's on page 95. I just took the picture. I just looked at it. That's funny. Look at it right there. It's right next to Sunstar and Elk Mountains. So that's a rare picture for you, huh?
Well, listen to this. There was a story behind that, too. I made the photograph in December 1993.
Yep, that's what the caption says.
And I had the 2 previous years volunteered to then U.S. Senator from Colorado, Timothy Worth, to photograph 750,000 acres of prospective wilderness in Colorado, mostly high country, so that he would have images, not just boundaries on maps, to show the entire Congress in Washington, D.C., how beautiful these places were and why they should be added to the National Wilderness Preservation System, That's the Wilderness Act of 1964, our highest form of land protection in America. And so on my own volition, I spent a year and a half, backpacking hundreds of miles to get photos so that they could be put into a little book to be given to everybody in Congress so that we could partner to get this bill passed, and it worked. In 1993, we passed the 1993 Colorado Wilderness Bill, which is, I said, added 750,000 acres to the wilderness system in America. And then NBC Nightly News wanted to do a story about this, so they snowmobiled me up to the lake with Roger O'Neill, the reporter, and a photographer, and I was standing with that scene you see in the book in the background with my hand or arm propped up on my camera on a tripod, and I was just about ready to do the interview, and I turned around and looked at the mist coming off the lake and the snow blowing off the peaks, and I said, interview suspended, turned around, got the shot with my medium format Pentax camera. Then we did the interview, and then that night I was on NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw in front of 16 million people.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what's interesting about this book is that there's a book full of images in it, but there's almost a book full of words in it as well. There's like a half a page of text under each picture, and each one of those is talking about the story behind the image. Did you enjoy that part of the process?
Well, it wasn't part of the plan. Once I'd edited pretty much my life's work into 800 photos that I thought would look good in black and white, and then those down to the 230 that ended up in the book. Whenever I looked at one of those final images, I started thinking about the sensuousness of the moment, or maybe something to do with the design, the composition of the photo, or maybe some background story like I just mentioned. And I felt like just spontaneously writing, and it ended up writing 30,000 words of text, which, as you can see, doesn't really distract from it being a picture book, but there's so much in there for people to grasp, from tips of places where to go and how to make good photos to just interesting stories like the NBC Nightly News story.
Wow. Yeah, and I've looked through the book a couple times now. I used to live in Yosemite, and I became obsessed with Ansel Adams and his work and his gallery there. And I absolutely loved looking through your book. And a lot of the places I just didn't recognize. And I've been fortunate to see a lot of Colorado, but a lot of those mountains and a lot of those angles just were not familiar to me because they weren't those popular viewpoints. And so
it's not your fault, Mason.
Yeah.
We have 44 wilderness areas in the National Wilderness Preservation System in Colorado, and a total of 66 million acres across the whole state. And you're talking to somebody who's pretty much been everywhere. I've covered over 40 years each of 28 mountain ranges, and I've been into the most remote parts of all of them, and I've photographed almost every alpine lake or group of alpine lakes and the spectacular cirques and drainages of those places, but not to mention the eastern plains and all of the western sandstone river canyons that we have. So, don't feel badly that you don't recognize some of those places, because there's not too many of us that have seen everything.
Right. Well, yeah, you got about 10 times as much time as I have out there, but you've also just seen, you've been just so active in the last 40 years doing this. You have accolade after accolade. In fact, I saw that the Pope was gifted one of your books earlier this year.
Yeah, I had an interesting spring. I did January through April, I spend skiing one day and then editing photos from the year before in the program called Lightroom. the next day. So I kind of go back and forth, but I did some traveling too. And but one of the episodes was a doctor in Denver sending me photos from the Vatican with his brother, who is a priest who works at the Vatican. He's American, but he works at the Vatican. And the doctor from Denver and his brother and family gained an audience at the Vatican with the Pope, and they asked me to inscribe a book, my book called Mountain Ranges of Colorado, to the Pope, and they presented it to him, and they made some snapshots of the presentation and sent them back to me, which was quite an honor. But the irony is, a week after I learned that the Pope had received my book, I was in Groton, Connecticut, helping to launch the newest U.S. nuclear Virginia-class submarine called the USS Colorado. I had donated photos to the Navy. They were printed and mounted in the submarine, in the crew's quarters, and in the mess area in order to improve the quality of life with these Colorado photos inside the sub. So that was all in March, and I thought it was kind of ironic that one day the Pope, who represents peace and tranquility, is receiving a book of tranquility of Colorado mountains, and the next day I'm helping to facilitate nuclear warfare. Although, before you laugh, if one looks at the history of the Catholic Church, no offense, you Catholics out there, but they were pretty aggressive for many centuries promoting their religion. So maybe it wasn't opposites after all.
I didn't even put that together, but yeah, what a week. Jeez. You know, and that kind of funny. I just read a quote yesterday from Theodore Roosevelt talking about, I'm going to paraphrase, I'm going to butcher it, I'm sure. But he said something about, you know, the nations get along better when they spend time outdoors, is basically what he was saying. And he's like, so that just is a great example that no matter where you stand, no matter what you stand for or what you're doing, everyone loves a beautiful scene of nature. That will bring anyone at peace, and I think, you know, those two examples prove it immensely.
One of the other books I did in my life, and maybe my favorite, is a book called Rocky Mountain National Park, a 100-year perspective, and it's out of print, but it was one of the highlights of my life. In the summers of 1993 and 1994, I was given a permit by the Park Service, Rocky Mountain, to go and camp and explore wherever I wanted to go, which was antithetical to the park policy, which is there is no overnight camping above tree line anywhere in the park, with or without a permit. They don't allow it. And I convinced the superintendent of Rocky Mountain to let me have rule of the roost for 2 years, mostly because I gave them original 4x5-inch transparencies straight out of the camera to keep as a scientific visual record of the ecosystem as of 1994. So I did exactly that. I spent 50 nights in the park above tree line in 2 summers with 4 or 5 Sherpas or young people helping me carry all the gear. And I got effectively to cover the entire 265 square miles on foot. I saw every nook, every cranny, photographed each of 155 alpine and subalpine lakes. But my predecessor was a guy named Enos Mills, who was the father of the park, who the park was made a park in 1916, and in large part because of his advocacy. He was a great photographer and writer, and toured the country to make sure that this place became a national park, ultimately not a place to log or to mine. And his writing was very inspirational. And he said, you know, exactly what you said. His philosophy was that there is no greater medicine in life than nature, that nature is a cure-all for all of our travails. And he even said in 1900, you know, medicine for the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and that's 1900, not 2018. There's no
Jeez.
better medicine than being outdoors in nature, and no better medicine than parks.
Man, I couldn't agree more, dude. I when I graduated from college, I'd spent about 6 months bicycling to about 35 national parks, and it absolutely changed my life. But I only got to stay on the roads for most of it. You got to see every square inch of Rocky Mountain. I mean, that's a trip of a lifetime. That must have felt pretty incredible to be in the middle of.
Well, mostly because it's such a sublime and prodigious place. In fact, I didn't photograph the park until I'd photographed much of the rest of Colorado, because I didn't think I was ready emotionally, artistically, for that place with its massive mountains and incredible alpine cirques, glacial basins, lakes, tarns. I was afraid of it, that I just couldn't do justice to it. So I kind of waited until halfway through my career. And that's why it was the project of a lifetime, because it is one of the most extraordinary places on earth, at least, mountain alpine areas.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible.
The best travel gear isn't born in a factory. It's inspired by journeys taken by real people exploring the world. That's why I love Rourke. Their team pulls designs and inspiration straight from the places they travel and have adventures. And for over 10 years, they've been exploring the globe to seek adventures on the road less traveled. Everything from surfing waves on remote island chains to exploring the streets of Jakarta, the Scottish Highlands, and almost everything in between. Rourke has developed options for you. I'm actually wearing the Rourke Bless Up breathable stretch shirt right now, and I was wearing a Rourke shirt yesterday. I'm traveling right now, and you could probably hear the echo in the room, but I was at this event. This guy was speaking, and he looked down at me and pointed at me right in the middle of his talk and said, "Nice shirt." And I was like, "Thank you very much." It was a Rourke shirt, and I've got my Accomplice Mule 45-liter bag. I love it because it can hold all my podcast gear, take it on the plane, but also holds extra stuff. I can put some clothes in there too, and if I didn't have my podcast gear, it could probably hold everything I needed for this trip. And it's water resistant. I love that. So Rourke offers durable, comfortable styles inspired by the places they've been. And they've got their latest collection, the Hokkaido, featuring Japanese prints and patterns and Japanese manufactured Kaihara premium denim. So if you're traveling, Rourke has the gear options. And for a limited time, if you're a listener of the show, you can get 15% off your first order. Go to Rourke.com. Use the code ASP15 at checkout. That's ROARK.com, and use the code ASP15 for 15% off your first order.
This episode is brought to us by Oris Watches. You know, a piece of equipment on any adventure that I'm honestly surprised by how much I use is my watch. And I'm wearing a watch right now. I always have a watch on. And I believe that you should check out Oris Watches. Oris is a 119-year-old family-owned independent watch brand based out of Holstein, Switzerland. The brand has been certified climate and carbon neutral since 2021, and every year releases a sustainability report. Oris only makes mechanical watches like the new Pro Pilot X Caliber 400 and the new Pro Pilot Altimeter featuring a 3D printed carbon case. If you're a fan of mechanical watches like I am, there's nothing in the game that's better than Oris, and you can discover the full Oris collection at a retailer near you or at oris.ch. So if you want that one piece of equipment in your life to be functional, to be useful, to be beautiful, artistic, check out Oris Watches. Oris, go your own way. This episode is brought to us by Oris Watches. You know, a piece of equipment on any adventure that I'm honestly surprised by how much I use is my watch. And I'm wearing a watch right now. I always have a watch on. And I believe that you should check out Oris Watches. Oris is a 119-year-old family-owned independent watch brand based out of Holstein, Switzerland. The brand has been certified climate and carbon neutral since 2021, and every year releases a sustainability Reliability Report. Oris only makes mechanical watches like the new Pro Pilot X Caliber 400 and the new Pro Pilot Altimeter featuring a 3D printed carbon case. If you're a fan of mechanical watches like I am, there's nothing in the game that's better than Oris, and you can discover the full Oris collection at a retailer near you or at oris.ch. So if you want that one piece of equipment in your life to be functional, to be useful, to be beautiful, artistic, check out Oris watches. Oris, go your own way. I cannot tell you how excited I am about this partnership. Today's episode is brought to us by Yosemite National Park. If you know me at all, you know that Yosemite is my absolute favorite place in the whole entire world. I've been all over the world. I've seen almost every national park. Yosemite is special. It just has this aura about it, this just air that is magical and important. You can tell, it's one of the first protected pieces of land ever in the world. It's amazing. It is a window to heaven. And what makes it so great is the hundreds of miles of some of the best hiking trails in the world. Leisurely walks down in the valley. I'm talking like flat walks all the way to the adventurous treks with thousands of feet of elevation gain that have the most breathtaking scenes you could ever imagine. Iconic sites like Half Dome, El Capitan, the Mariposa Grove of giant sequoias. It will leave you awestruck. And with the fall coming, that means warm days and cool nights. There's also outside of the park the historic Gold Rush town of Mariposa, boasts one of the best small town culture scenes in the U.S. Nearby Coulterville, named the friendliest town in America by Reader's Digest. And all throughout Mariposa County, you'll find a variety of options for lodging and recreation, rustic cabins to Four Diamond Resorts, and everything in between. Great dining options, museums galore, including the Yosemite Climbing Museum, which we've had people on this show from there, and even live music festivals. And if you're like me, you're into history and the history of the national parks, well, that's where it all got started. There is no place on earth like Yosemite. And in fact, beyond this partnership, I hope one day that we can take listeners of this show to Yosemite every year for a yearly retreat. So if you haven't already, plan your trip to Yosemite, plan your trip to Mariposa County, and go be mesmerized and awestruck just like I am every time I go. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode. You're not from Colorado originally, so why Colorado? What led you here?
In the summer of 1964, my middle school science teacher, Mrs. Dolly Hickman, who had the habit of taking 7 kids in her station wagon, that's kind of like a minivan for you youngsters, towing a pop-up camper across the U.S., visiting archaeological, biological, geological, paleontological places. These are middle school kids going out for 5 weeks, getting to camp out every night and to see science and nature at its best. And I did it for 2 summers. The second summer across the middle of the U.S., camped in Rocky Mountain National Park in August of 1964. Saw Long's Peak, compared it in my mind to Mount Mitchell and the Appalachians, and realized this was a place that I belonged. And I told Mrs. Hickman at that moment that I'm at age 14 that I'm going to live here someday. And do you know, I befriended her 15 years after graduating high school and after I became a nature photographer, and we saw each other every year until she died at age 95.
Wow.
And we would talk the trip, and she never forgot that I had told her when I was 14 that I would live in Colorado someday. So that was the first of the felicitous things that happened in my life, and others were, I had an uncle that ran a company in Colorado, and he got me jobs working out here in my high school and college summers, working on a cattle ranch, working prospecting for gold, silver, copper for his steel corporation around the West in Colorado. So when I got out of Duke University with an accounting degree in 1972, 3 days later, I was out here in Colorado looking for work.
So how the heck did how was she able to take you in a station wagon across how'd you sign up for it? For only 7 kids to be able to go?
This is back in the days before society became so litigious. So it was a private school for one, so we had a little more freedom, to do things like that. It was in the summer, and I don't even think my parents signed anything. They just, kids that were invited either said yes or no, and she could fit 7 kids plus herself plus another adult to supervise young teenagers, which they weren't able to do actually, which made the trip even more fun. So, very one of those things in life that was formative and remarkable.
What a thing for a teacher to do. Spend all summer or spend all school year with a bunch of y'all, little brats, and then have to take 7 of you across the country in the summer. That's some sacrifice, man.
And what a thing to do. So she did that for 20 summers, 7
Holy
kids, that's 100
cow.
kids, and every kid was indelibly affected for the rest of their lives. They became doctors and scientists and nature photographers. And whenever I speak to teachers, I always tell the story of Mrs. Hickman, and I say, I hope you teachers get the joy of what happened to Mrs. Hickman when her student, me, contacted her 15 years later and said to her, "You are the reason why I am who I am today." In my case, the nature photographer who started out as a businessman and became a nature photographer by turning one's passion into a new career. But I gave her credit for that, and what a joy that must have been for her to know that her time as a teacher influenced somebody to that degree.
No kidding, man. That had to make so many hard days worth it for her to hear that. That is unbelievable. My wife's a teacher, and it's the little things that get them through, but I wouldn't call that a little thing. I'd call that a pretty big victory on her end. So you obviously loved the landscape, and you wanted to be out here. What led you to photography, and how did you begin to get a foothold in the world of photography? Because there's a lot of people taking pictures, man.
I had another inspiration at that same school in high school. My art teacher, Mr. Tony Birch, was a good one. And even though I wasn't very good with my hands and paints and sculpture, he generated in me a passion for being creative and just trying to discover what was inside of me and expressing it with paints mostly. And so I had an art background too. And when I moved to Colorado with my outdoor background, I tried to put the two together as a avocation at least, and taking paints and paintbrushes and canvases into the wilderness didn't work out so well. So I rented a camera in 1973, a 35 millimeter Pentax, and stuck some Kodachrome 25 film in it and put on my running shoes, taped my ankles like football practice, and in my shorts and t-shirts, I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning in Denver and drive 2 hours and 45 minutes to the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of southern Colorado, and with a day pack full of camera gear and a little bit of food and water, jog from 8,500 feet to 12,500 feet so I could be there at sunrise and make a photo and then jog back down. And I just remember people looking at me on the trail. This is before the days of not only running in the mountains, but just running in general. And this is the early 70s, looking at me like I was absolutely nuts. So yeah, art background and passion for the outdoors, put those two together, and then ultimately some business skills, an accounting degree. And that's what allowed me to make a living over the last 37 years.
So was it difficult at first?
Absolutely. But fun. My eye was horrible. I made bad photos, but by looking at Ansel Adams' work and Elliot Porter's, and I didn't have the time or the resources to take classes or go to workshops like I teach today. And it was a matter of trial and error of making my slides and coming back and comparing my images to those of those two great photographers and trying to figure out organically what what was wrong. Why didn't mine look like theirs did? And by hook and crook and trial and error and, admitting my failures, but also giving myself credit for my successes. I don't think there's any learning process better than by the seat of one's pants, and did that for 7 or 8 years as a hobby, and then felt like I was ready to quit my first career, which was the department store business, and see if I could make a living out of nature photography.
So was trying to forge a living out of your photographs a little more rewarding than department store management?
Ironically, yes, but not quite in the way that you might think that they might be polar opposites, because setting up a department in a department store with umpteen colors of towels on a wall or alligator shirts takes visual skill, and the visual skill to attract the butterfly to the flower, the shopper to the merchandise, in some ways is no different than the skill of composing a color photo to attract the viewer to the book, to the print, to the slide. And some of the things I learned that way artistically lent to making good photos, but especially the merchandising skill, learning how to sell, was critical to the business side of my career. How could it's one thing to make a pretty picture, as most creative people know. It's another thing entirely to be able to sell it. And my merchandising skills, and as I said, my accounting degree and my business skills to run a business were absolutely critical to being able to ultimately make a living.
There are so many people making beautiful pictures, even back then, I'm sure. How did you set yourself apart? When did you first start seeing like, wow, I can make money doing this?
No, that's a good question, Mason, because anybody who spends time outdoors would love to make a living out of being outdoors, and photography is one of the best ways to express oneself and what you see and what you feel. How did I break in? Well, my eye wasn't that good, and there were other photographers far better than I was artistically, but I did it by starting a publishing company. I couldn't find any New York publishers to publish my work because I was just one more unknown nature photographer aspiring. So with my business skills, merchandising background, I started my own publishing company, borrowed a little money from my dad, printed my 1982 Colorado scenic wall calendar and hoofed it to every bookstore and gift shop in the state, like 140 stores, and all but one took my product because it was like a Sierra Club calendar. Really, decent photography, good printing, but about Colorado. And back in those days, there weren't really any other good calendars about Colorado. There were some dime store calendars. That was it. So I found a niche in the market for something that didn't exist, and something that people wanted was a good-looking Colorado calendar for their wall. And that was my first published product. And then I published my first coffee table book. And again, there wasn't much competition. And the theory was not only tourists, but people who lived here in Colorado wanted things to send back to their friends and relatives in New Jersey and Texas and wherever, and kind of twist the knife. Look where I live and you don't.
I know I do that a little bit. So it was hustle. It sounded like, you were able to find a niche. You went and you couldn't find anybody to publish your work, so you started your own publishing company. That's some hustle, man. And then you just send it out and you get no's, I'm sure. Lots of no's originally. But now I walked into Tattered Cover the other day. I had some family visiting and I wanted to take them there. And you have an entire wall of your books on display in the Tattered Cover bookstore in downtown Denver. So you go from being one of the calendars on the shelf to having an entire wall to yourself. And it's probably just been lots of little steps like that along the way that have got you there.
Well, yeah, you said hustle, and for me, it's perseverance. Once I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, frankly, I said to myself, there's no way I'm not going to pull this off. And, that's a bold attitude, but it's the attitude of entrepreneurs. And, I found out after being in a career where I was an employee that I was meant to be somebody, making their own decisions and making their own mistakes and gaining their own successes, that was more satisfying for me. So it took somewhat of that mentality, but definitely there's no way I'm going to fail. And, but that takes thoughtfulness. It's not, quite as capricious as it sounds. It means you got to have a good plan, a good financial plan. You got to have some financing. So yeah, my dad loaned me a little bit of money to help get that calendar printed. But then in order to print expensive coffee table books, I had to find a venture capitalist, and I sold him half my company, and he got me bank loans and lent me money so I could print these, other things. And then you got to have backup plans for plans. If it doesn't work out, what are you going to do? And so really, it was just classic entrepreneur, covering all the bases. But again, more than anything else, it's that, like you implied, that force of will that I am not going to fail.
Were there ever times that it seemed like it wasn't going to work for you?
Absolutely. That's what every entrepreneur goes through. And we didn't make a whole lot of money for my partner and me until about 10 years later. But what we did do was prove that there was a niche in the market for high quality photographic souvenirs, whether calendars or coffee table books or guidebooks. And it just was a matter of getting everything to line up so it could bring money to the bottom line. And ultimately, it involved not just me photographing Colorado and publishing my own work, but hiring other photographers, nature photographers like me, all around the country to do similar books and calendars of other states. So in its heyday, my company, West Cliff Publishers, was publishing products like I do in Colorado and 35 other states. And that, allowed me to make a decent living and to begin to raise a family while I, traveled.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. Are you a busy person with lots of passions and lots of responsibilities and very little time like me? Well, you might be a fan of Green Chef. Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for eating clean, dinners that work for you. They deliver everything you need to eat great the easy way this October. Feel your best with nutrition-approved recipes delivered right to your door. Easy to prep meals, all the ingredients you need, and pretty good-sized portions too. I'm a big guy. I'm like 6'4", 220 on a good day. And, I'm always worried, oh man, is this going to be enough food for me? Because I can put it down. Well, Green Chef, man, I believe it or not, my family of 4 had leftovers afterwards. Now, granted, the kids are small, but I more than make up for what they don't eat. And we had leftovers. It felt good. I didn't feel sluggish. I didn't feel like I put too much butter or salt or anything on it. It was clean eating. Especially this time of year, things get crazy. Maybe the weather's turning in your area. And it's just tough. It's just tough to grocery shop. Man, that's one of my least favorite things to do. I'm thankful we can grocery shop, but Green Chef made it easy. Delivered it right to my door to make a home-cooked, nutritious meal for my family. So if you want to give Green Chef a shot, go to greenchef.com/60ASP and use the code 60ASP to get 60% off plus free shipping. That's an insane deal. 60% off. Again, that's greenchef.com/ASP60 and use the code ASP60 for 60% off and free shipping. The link's in the show notes. Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode. Did you ever want to quit?
Absolutely not. Once you get a taste of being able to go out 30 weeks a year or 20 weeks a year to spend your days, your nights, your sunrises in wilderness, kind of hard to go back. So no, there was never any thought of going back into the department store business or being an accountant. But we did well. There was a niche in the market for these kinds of products back in the 80s when I started, and still is. But today, of course, it's a little different with the web. But nevertheless, we found what people wanted, and we provided it to them. And I was the lucky beneficiary of that, feeding photos to people while getting to have a pretty incredible lifestyle in the out of doors.
Yeah, no kidding, man. That's exciting. So did the pressure to provide for your family change the way you take pictures, or did you just say, what I think's most beautiful is probably what other people will think is most beautiful?
Yeah, that's a good point, Mason. Sometimes one makes photos for one's own inner self versus what might be more commercially viable, but it was never a conflict. I must say I do love photographing intimate landscapes, which is what Elliot Porter called the landscape without the crutch of a horizon and sky, where you're just photographing textures and details and colors within nature, which you'll see in my annual Colorado engagement calendars more than you'll see scenics. And the scenics tend to go in the wall calendars, but people love that kind of thing too. And this new book, Colorado Black on White, is going to be a real good test to see, how many people out there really appreciate Ansel Adams and what black and white has to offer instead of color, because it's not that, massive display of colorful Colorado that's so attractive to folks. So no, I didn't really have to compromise what I was doing. The only compromises were on the part of my children and wife as they were growing up, who, when Dad went out for a week with the old-fashioned large format 4x5 view camera on his back, it would cost me $2 to buy a sheet of 4x5 Fujichrome film and another $2.50 to have it processed. So every time I pushed the shutter, that was almost $5, and I would shoot 500 sheets in a week. So that's $2,500 to come home with a week's worth of photos, which meant that the kids didn't eat very well the week after that.
Oh man, that is crazy. So even then, it was a struggle trying to build this career.
For sure, but we stuck with it. The family supported me. Coloradans and others supported me, and it all worked out in the end. So I'm very fortunate. That's
really cool. I never knew any of that. And can I ask you this? Photography, I feel like it's changed a lot since you started, and the sheer volume of beautiful pictures is just when you look at stats of how many pictures are being taken year after year, it's kind of mind blowing. It's almost scary how frequently someone is snapping a picture and how easily it can be posted. Has the onset of internet galleries through places like Facebook and Instagram, has that changed the way you approach your business?
Somewhat. It probably changes the way that a new photographer would consider how to make a career. I still have one foot in the old-fashioned way and now one foot in the new way. So because I've been doing this for so long, I still am able to sell a new coffee table book or new calendars every year traditionally through bookstores, of which there's still plenty, but also new kinds of retail, like Costco carries my books and calendars, and thank goodness Barnes and Noble is still around. But on the other hand, photos are a dime a dozen, and we don't do much stock photography anymore, where I might sell or lease a transparency to an advertising agency to do an ad in Time magazine, for example, and that used to make us a pretty good fee, but because photos are a dime a dozen, that end of the business is no longer viable. So I spread my work around and market myself in different ways, whether books and calendars, or I love teaching photography workshops and my fine art print business where I decorate walls in homes and offices and institutions is a viable business. But my marketing has changed. For example, this year for the new Colorado Black on White book, I have gone almost completely digital and SEM, search engine marketing, and via my website and through Google and Facebook, I'm promoting digitally and electronically and socially this new book in ways that I've never promoted books before.
So do you enjoy learning those new skills? I guess you have to if you want to keep doing this.
Kind of. I must say, as much as I love engaging with people. I do, 30 or 40 slideshows to thousands of people around Colorado and beyond every year. And that's one of the highlights of my year is being face to face with people who love the same things I love. But I'm not very gregarious in terms of Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I'm private and I like sharing what I do in the ways that we've been discussing, but socially in the social media, I'm not very aggressive. But this time of the year when there's books to be sold, I get a little more aggressive. But I hire other people to do that for me. So I have a company in Colorado Springs, social SEO, who helps me with a lot of these electronic ways in which to market myself that I might not do well all by myself.
Yeah, and I mean that's honestly smart. Why you're good at what you do. Why don't you, instead of trying to learn an entirely new skill, just hire it out, and it saves you probably a lot of headache. And honestly, man, if I could get rid of all this social media stuff, I would. It's such a headache. If there was a just way that I didn't have to stare at a screen and get all this work done, it's so crucial in today's world. But I honestly can't stand it. Life is so much better without it, in my opinion.
Well, I have to tell you, you may lament all the time you spend on the computer for the social and marketing aspect. I'm on the computer most of the winter editing in Lightroom, the processing program from Adobe, my photos, because it's one thing to take a digital photo, but it's another to make it look the way the eye sees, and that requires, processing it electronically. So I get my share of screen viewing just like you do, and it's part of the deal, and I actually love it because it's a very artistic process, just like converting all of those color photos, which is exactly what I did electronically into black and white. Was a real joy.
That's great, man. Do you see yourself doing more of these, black and white?
I don't know. We will see how people embrace it. And, the thing that I enjoy the most is just being outdoors. These days, I'm not so much project oriented as I was early in my career, where I would specifically go hike the entire Colorado Trail or Continental Divide Trail or cover the entire Rocky Mountain National Park specifically to produce a book about those things. Now I tend to do these accumulations of photos from my lifetime that fit together in some cogent way, and this most recent one is black and white, and who knows what it'll be next year. Although I kind of got an inkling of what it might be, actually.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Well, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but one of the things I love doing is panoramic photos. In fact,
man.
Now with digital cameras, I can take up to 9 or 10 verticals, one right next to the other as I kind of rotate around. And it's advantageous because I don't end up with fisheye distortion, which you get with wide-angle lenses when you're trying to photograph a big part of the landscape. So now I'll cock the camera vertical either on the tripod or handheld, and I'll make, like I said, anywhere from 4 to 9 verticals, slightly overlapping each one. And then in Lightroom or Photoshop, I can stitch them all together seamlessly and end up with files, sometimes 40,000 pixels across by 8,000 pixels high. And I have a number of clients who like to cover massive institutional walls, 300 feet long sometimes or more, with a big mural, and we print these photos on adhesive wallpaper and then seamlessly mount them in strips to do this. But the product of that are a lot of these really long panoramic images that I was thinking might make a nice book someday. So imagine a book that might be 20 inches long by 10 inches high, but the binding wouldn't be on the left. The binding would be at the top. So you would actually flip the book open from bottom to top to get from page to page.
Oh, that would be so fantastic. I absolutely love panoramas.
Your listeners heard it here.
Okay, heard it here first, huh? That's incredible. So, as we wrap up, I'd love to know, just share with us what's been something that's come easy over the years to build your career, and what's something that's been surprisingly difficult?
That's a tough one, but let me see if I can think on my feet, because that's what I basically got to do.
Well, yeah, by the seat of your pants.
In the wilderness,
you just told
half
me to do
of it
that.
is planned, half's planned, and the other half is spontaneous, reacting to light and changing weather quickly. So let's see if I can think on my feet. Well, I think one of the easiest things is falling in love with 4 billion years of the evolution of life on Earth, that when you have seen the sublime places that I've seen, not just here in Colorado, but around America and North America and around the planet, and under conditions of light and weather that are sometimes impossible to describe and hard to believe that you were there at that moment in time, but easier to maybe show in a photo. That part was easy, and that's why I became an environmentalist after a while, because of that fortune to see just how special life is on planet Earth. I think the hard thing sometimes is communicating that. I spend half my life now not photographing, but talking to people and talking about issues and trying to get people to understand, again, how fortunate we are to be a two-armed, two-legged, two-eyed Homo sapien on a planet, in a solar system, in a galaxy, in a universe, in a multiverse. And, it's tough sometimes with all the things we got to deal with in life to, at arm's length, realize how lucky we are to be a sentient being and to appreciate all these things, whether it's friends or family or nature, and getting people to vote the right way and to think the right way, because that's what it takes in the end to protect it, is societies making laws and sticking with those laws and thinking long term and wanting to be unselfish and allow our kids and grandkids to enjoy the same things we have. There's some hard heads out there that I got to crack these days to get them to think the right way and vote the right way. That's been the toughest part, is sometimes sharing the miracle of life on Earth with other people who I know they appreciate it deep down inside, but they don't act like that sometimes.
I definitely have experienced that myself, and I think the best medium that you can get people in to be open to those new ideas is exactly what you're doing. Getting them out there, showing it to them through pictures, and hopefully that inspires them to go out there, see it for themselves, and essentially be changed. Because there's nothing that's had the effect on me like the outdoors, and I know that you're exactly the same in that sense.
Mason, you just concluded one of the best interviews I've ever done. I can't imagine an interview ending on a point any better taken than what you just said.
Oh, man, I appreciate it.
Good for both of us. Thanks again.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to growing the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.